Welcome to the Living in Alignment podcast. My name is Amy Landry. Through a collage of conversations, here we distill mindful living and timeless wisdom within a modern, everyday context. Thank you for being here. Maya Tiwari is an Ayurveda Matriarch, peace leader, humanitarian, and a best-selling author of multiple books. She has been in the field for more than 35 years. Fondly called Mother Maya or Ma, she established the first Ayurvedic school in North America in 1981, the Wise Earth School of Ayurveda, and founded the Mother Om Mission, a charitable organization that works in the at-risk communities of New York. Maya Tiwari helps communities to transform disease and despair into wellness and joy. Among the many gems she has restored to the earth-based education of Ayurveda are the Sadhana of food, breath, and sound, the earth therapies of Pancha Karma, and the long-lost lunar education of women's healing. Ma has been meticulously trained in the Vedas, Vedanta, Ayurveda, Sanskrit, Vedic Chants, and also in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. Born in Guyana into an illustrious family of East Indian heritage, Ma moved to New York in her late teens to avoid the Civil War. She rapidly became a highly sought-after fashion designer, with Princess Diana as one of her celebrity clientele. A life-threatening ovarian cancer survivor at age 23, she has personally helped thousands of women to heal from devastating disorders. Her own journey with health was a catalyst for reclaiming her cultural roots and ultimately, through divine circumstances, finding her guru, Swami Dayananda Saraswati. Maya served for 2 years as a Vedic monk belonging to India's prestigious Veda Vyasa lineage. In 2010, Maya made the radical decision to renounce her monastic life to be of wider service to the populations in need. Through her global humanitarian work with the World Peace Mandala and Honor Ancestors conferences, participants are taught to spread practices that promote inner peace, ancestral wellness, and create harmony with Mother Earth. Spiritual pioneer, Maya is a regular featured speaker at the Parliament of the World Religions and other interfaith and holistic health conferences worldwide. Ma is also the recipient of the Dhanvantari Award and Apna's Rishi Award for her outstanding work in Ayurvedic medicine. If you would like to learn from Maya Tiwari, you might like to reach out for one of her many books, particularly The Path of Practice or Ayurveda, A Life of Balance. You can find Ma online at mayatiwari.com. Also over on Facebook at facebook.com/Maya Tiwari, or perhaps over on Instagram at instagram.com/Wise Earth. Please enjoy this conversation with an extraordinary teacher and wise elder, Maya Tiwari. Ma, it is with tremendous reverence that I thank you so much for being with me today on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Amy Landry. I have heard much about your podcast. I'm so honored to be on it. I would also love you on mine when I do get set up. I'm back in New York City. I have relocated back from the mountains of North Carolina back to my old hometown. So it's a question now of getting set up and able to go forward. But we also have that wonderful podcast called Women's Power to Heal Mother Earth. And I've just started the idea of, I just started last year interviewing those that I'd love to have on my show, and I'd love to have you on mine as well. So hopefully we can plan on that in the near future.
Thank you. That's incredibly generous. I would be wildly honored. Thank you for offering. And Ma, I have recently actually revisited your incredible book, The Path of Practice, which I have here in front of me. This is actually a copy I picked up in India. It's a 2002 edition. I don't often see this particular cover, which I think has some temple carvings on it. But this book is filled with such accessible and simple yet very potent life-changing practices. And also within the book, you seamlessly weave through your remarkable personal story. And one of the things that struck me or resonated deeply within when I first read this book years ago was your approach to the concept of sadhana. And rather than seeing it as a standalone spiritual practice, as you briefly mentioned before we pressed record, you articulate in this book how sadhana very much encompasses all of our daily activities and serves to, in your words in the book, recover our natural rhythms and realign one's life with the cycles of the universe, which is just incredible. So if you're willing, I would love for you to expand upon this for those that are tuning into this conversation and to share your insight into this concept or through your lens, let's say.
Namaste. A pleasure to be here with you, Amy.
Thank you.
Sadhana is a Sanskrit word. Like so many Sanskrit words, they need to be understood properly or appropriately. So many words, namaste and guru. We have a whole wealth of Sanskrit words that have become popularized in the English language, which is good. But by the same token, we live in a culture of fad. Things that are rapidly moving towards a fashionable trend, towards a trend of this, a trend of food, a trend for the way we dress, a trend for the way we speak, a trend for the way we work, a trend for the way we do, a trend for bringing up our children, trends for everything else. And in this incredible chaotic environment of trends, we tend to lose sight of the natural rhythms that naturally guard and guide and safeguard our well-being. We are not the doers of our well-being, although we may think that we are. We are only the guides for our well-being. The doers of our well-being, or the doer singular, is Mother Earth, Mother Nature, her rhythms, her seasons, her efficacy, her time of violence, her time of breakdown, her time of disasters. Because sadhana comes from the root word in Sanskrit, sad, S-A-D-H, and that basically means to be with, to be at one with whatever. And that, in fact, the Buddhist has an understanding of presence, of course, comes from Hinduism. However, presence alone doesn't fully describe the understanding of being. The beingness is, of course, we also have the new language of like the acceptance of all things. Well, it's impossible to accept all things. There are things that do so rile us. There are things that do so break us. There are things that are so unethical in our culture that it is really very, very difficult. So a lot of wordology has to be examined. Sadhana is not about wordology. Sadhana is not about trend, fashion, or otherwise. Sadhana is about our beingness. And that beingness has been prescribed from the time of birth and beyond in our ancestral memory field, the beingness of who we are. The formation of who we are, generation after generation, we've been formed into certain entities. The entities we strive as a human person to become more aware in our daily life, to become more conscious in the world around us. And so basically, I want us to understand sadhana first at its very magnificent, multitudinous, complex level, but simple as it is that we are looking at our being. How do I feel today? What is happening? Am I facing the truth of what's going on? Am I dodging it? Why am I dodging it? Well, it doesn't matter. Let's not ever ask the question why. Just so we're dodging it. We witness that. Sometimes in the most painful field of our lives, and I go back to the destruction around us and the pain and the hurt. And because we are in that complex time of what is called a universal breakup. And all of us are feeling the rebound from it, the lashes from it. And everyone we speak to today, Amy, can assure you that there are things that have thrown them asunder, or life is off kilter, or it's just not the predictability that we have lived with for so long. And in a way, that's a good thing. So sadhana is also about understanding these are the rhythms of our time. So we're not only going with the natural rhythm of equanimity, of balance, of the stasis of nature. We are also having to work in, without any work, the acceptance, or I don't like that word, but the willingness to witness the fact that things are breaking around us, that things are violent around us, that there is pressure. So sadhana from day to day, moment to moment, will change depending on how we adapt to the circumstances of our lives, the circumstances of what's going on around us, the seasonal rhythms, the biorhythms, the solar rhythms, the lunar rhythms, the rhythm of our children, and the rhythm of it all. So there we are.
So it's very much really having this incredible field of awareness at all times, and being aware of, as you highlighted, I think, which is very pertinent right now in our world, highlighting what seems perhaps out of alignment or challenging our sense of alignment. And in doing so, living our life in this way is very much like a gateway to becoming acutely aware of our inner wisdom, and through our everyday, embracing our everyday activities and having a certain inner compass or inner awareness as we move about our day. Would that be correct? Does that sound aligned with your?
Yes, Amy, it is. And I have a tendency to go into circuitous little valleys with my description. And the reason that I do that, and I realize that it's also a very Vedic thing. We've been trained for umpteenth generation in the Vedic tradition of not only mastering intelligence, but more importantly, mastering awareness. And even for me, it is difficult when I face what I'm facing today in our world. Even for me, it is challenging. And I want to speak to each one of our generations, because each one of our generation right now has a specific amount of issues, problems, and stuff that actually is very consonant within that generation of our people. For the elderly, it is that time of never having made peace with death, or never having made peace with disease, or never having made peace with the broken. For your generation, absolutely time have accelerated. There isn't enough time to do the things that we have accustomed ourselves to doing, and so we've got to back off and revisit all of the quantum leaps we think we're going to be making through this myriad time of busyness. And we became chauffeurs for our children. We have too many activities for them. We take them to this and that and that and that, to that, to that. We tire them out. They break their backs with the amount of books they have to carry, or their sense organs with all of the computerized and online things that they're learning. So what I'm trying to say is I want to break up completely our fixed ideas of sadhana, the perfect life. There is no perfect life. There is life, and there is how we respond to life. And how we respond depends on the degree of awareness that we build, meaning we are witnessing, we're not necessarily indulging the circumstances, because many circumstances become much more difficult if we indulge them. And it doesn't mean that our heart isn't open. It means heart and mind are both open, but we are watching, we're looking at how something unfolds. It takes patience. It was never one of my greatest suits in life was patience. So it was not. I've always been a forerunner and a pioneer. And for those of us who break down barriers and boundaries and keep going with our head into the walls first, patience is not an idea that we stop to consider. But as I've grown older, And as many challenges have entered my life in terms of those factors that do not love what I do and make it very difficult, what I've begun to understand is that we're always given a chance to back off and catch up. And right now, my time at 72 is to back off and catch up on the understanding of patience. Not be so fast, because pioneers and frontiers people and all of our entrepreneurs like yourself, Amy, we go fast. There's a rapidity in mind and movement. And that's great while we are building our structures and building our work and making it available to the world in need. But then we get to a point where we've got to always pause at every age and at every decade, pause and look back and see and watch and resort our foundation building.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are junctures, and perhaps the understanding of sadhana, we breathe. We have to make sure we continue to breathe. We can stop, take pause during the day. These are landmarks of sadhana, which we do all the time, which we must do all the time. Back off, pause, make sure we're breathing. We can do the alternate breath, simple ones, which you can speak to your audience about or have already done so, and refer them to it. That takes over, the prana takes over from the mental construct. So if the mind is racing towards all of its conclusions and its unfortunate realities, the breath steps in and just eases out that. So breath is extremely important. As we said in Path of Practice, food is also important. And I'd love for us to, in our next conversation, Amy, talk about that more deeply, just food, because it is such a vast topic. It's not only the sustenance of our earth and our life and our whatever. The movements that we have tossed upon food have made us all, made life so squalid, really. It has not improved life. We want to be able to go back to, when we say organic, we mean really the farm, really the natural, personally owned, either by yourself, family, friends, community, whatever. We want to be able to go back there, not just have that become the big commercial hoo-ha-ha, and then tell us that we are not able to drink milk, because many of us are lactose tolerant, and I'm from India. I cannot live without milk. And of course, we try to find good quality milk, but we all know that today the understanding of good quality milk is non-existent, because milk is influenced. The cows are influenced memory-wise, sentiency-wise, by what's happening to the other cows that are being mistreated. And so if we're looking for anything purely organic, we'll never find it in our world today. There's bees, there's germination, there's animals that go from one field to the next, So what I'm trying to say is our understanding of food has to also shift back to way simpler understanding. So we're not, we can't just say, look, milk is an animal food, because I take offense to that, really. The cow has to eat the grass and process it through so much magnificence in their own anatomy in order to put out this white, exquisite nectar called milk, when they're treated properly. Of course, I do believe that we must protect them. We must protect every animal. But then first to start pulverizing millions and millions of seeds, which could also help us to feed the earth and address poverty and starvation. First to just go and pulverize it in an electromagnetic field that does destroy the seed completely to make our own milk is absurd. And you will not hear this from many people, but I have nothing to lose at this stage of my life. Yeah. So I speak truth. They're already after me. So basically, okay, we will continue to speak truth, especially in this way. So that to me is not an idea of sadhana. That is an idea of trend. That is an idea of following a trend. And it's also verged on elitism because basically food for one must be food for all.
Absolutely.
And we can never say that the new fads in food is going to be affordable to anybody except the rich. So there we go again. So there are many levels and layers of stuff we have impacted through commerciality, through marketing, through the system of capitalism, through the system of patriarchal capitalism. And we have to, those of us who are in the forefront of making the changes in this world, and all of us are needing to make this change, but the forerunners need to really start addressing these areas, and peacefully, of course, but as peacefully as we can get.
Yes.
So you would like to bring me back then to our subject now?
No, I'm enjoying what you're saying, and I very much resonate with it. And I think there is often a privilege that we can be in to argue on these certain topics when, as you say, we need to think about we need to think about everybody. And in the case of, something like milk, yes, there's actually a lot of environmental damage with producing all these seeds for seed milk. So I entirely stand with you, and I yes, I understand wholeheartedly. And something that I really appreciated that you, I suppose, let's say, alluded to in all that you've said is that in our really busy, chaotic world right now, I think we are more and more attached to outcomes. We're more attached to results. And I think this is where we really are misled or move away from that idea of living sadhana, where we are aware and we are refining our mind and our actions throughout everything we do in daily life, but also surrendering the outcome and just being truly present instead of thinking about how our actions are going to, bring us fruits or results in the future. And Ma, I loved in your book particularly, a couple of things that you said specifically already today. I think the listeners would have thought, okay, this sigh of relief. You've kind of freed up some heavy weightedness about sadhana. But in your book, you also mentioned that really any wholesome practice in daily life from any tradition, this is what we have to get out of the mindset of, that it has to be some kind of Indian or yoga or Ayurveda related practice. But you state any wholesome practice from any tradition, when it's performed with that real awareness, can be considered sadhana.
I'll tell you why I love Australia. The origins of your people in Australia. I have done perhaps 20 tours in Australia. And I fell in love with Perth. I fell in love with many different areas, not the usual tourist places like the Gold Coast, but there, Australia is extremely beautiful. But I've also been met with the most amazing acceptance in your country by all, including the Aboriginal. And we've done some of my mission work, my mother-owned mission, Mom for short, work with some of the Aboriginals in Western Australia, in terms of reproductive health, etc., etc. If there is no ease with sadhana, we are not doing sadhana. We are doing a prescribed stuff that adds more stress to our lives. How many practices can we actually do in the day? We get up, we breathe, we go to yoga, we do running, we come back, we feed, we take the children to school, it goes on and on and on. That is not sadhana. That's a regime. That's a regimen. Consistency is important in sadhana, but not necessarily to the point of being regimental. Okay, here's my point. So yes, wonderful to do yoga every day, every other day, whatever. But something has happened. You've just had a phone call, someone of dear importance is lost to you, died, whatever. Or just discovered they had this disease. It happens like with me, 5 times a day I get calls that are related, even when I'm traveling and taking time out of the norm. It still finds me that these, and you are about to take your yoga mat out and do your yoga. Are you going to continue to take your mat out and do the yoga? What is more important at that point? You have to decide. Does a call need to be made? Do I need to do something? Do I need to instead take my mat and do a prayer? How can I lend myself to the moment more appropriately? So the flexibility has to be there.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you, with all that has happened, and I was knocked down really severely and seriously about a year or so ago, but some things had been ongoing. And I wouldn't go into the details. They're not important. What's important is this, that I had every generosity to myself to back off from the daily routines, which was tremendous. The computer, this, the podcast, the online courses after COVID or during COVID, all of that, the rerouting. And then finally we got hacked on the computer and whatever part of the things that had been unfortunately targeting me and my work. But what I ended up understanding is back off. For me, that is the best sadhana you can do. And that was difficult for someone who is with the rapidity that I not only have had, but naturally so, intuitively so.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to work at being extremely kapha for a while, extremely sluggish for a while. Didn't take much to become sluggish because of what was going on with the health, but also, most importantly, the reflection. At a certain age, the amount of reflection, the amount of memory coming back, and the amount of mourning of what I consider losses in my life, or unfairness, or the injustice of certain things, or whatever. And in all of it, there's so many do-gooders and well-gooders that say to you, acceptance, you have to accept what's going on. You have to learn the lesson from what's going on, and then you have to march on from learning the lessons. And I'm like, if I could use the four-letter word, I would use it now, because basically people don't heal from that kind of advice. And I'll tell you why we can't heal from that kind of advice, from all of these preachers that preach it, because it lacks understanding, it lacks compassion, it lacks the oneness of symmetry with who you're talking to and what you're listening and what you're hearing. And oftentimes the best thing you can do is just be and listen and say, do as your own intuition tells you to do. Do what you feel you need to do. Forget all of the constraints, the practices, just be. You're telling someone to be okay about taking time to mourn. You're telling someone to be okay about telling time to heal, to hurt, to dig into whatever pile of ancestral stuff we usually are forced to dig into when things hit us that hard. And they do send us to the ancestral lockbox, and we've got to break through it, and we've got to do those things, but only you can do that. But your friends can sort of embrace you with the permission to do it, embrace you with the be generous to yourself, do as you please. But everyone is afraid of being judged. People like myself who are out there who've been pathfinders, who've been path makers, and who talk about, we never talk about the perfect life. We've always, the first or second book was about the life of balance. Balance is sadhana, however we find that balance. I have been teaching ahimsa, which is another facet of sadhana. Ahimsa is our first sadhana. It means peace, self-peace. None hurting, none hurt others. Do not be violent to others. Do not participate in violence. Do not participate in violent mental thoughts. Do not participate in violent actions or in violent words. And I have had to break the rule of ahimsa quite a few times in my Anga from what had come after me. And then I say, okay, I break it, I can forgive myself too, and I will go on, because that's as simple as it is. Am I going to hold myself hostage again after I'm being held hostage by others, now to try and forgive myself and go through the guilt and whatever? Well, thankfully, my tradition doesn't give us too much guilt-ridden whatever to go with. But it does give us wanting to be accepted, wanting to be told you're doing okay, that, and then you've got to let go of all of that. You've got to. That's what sadhana is, and this is a very different definition of sadhana. If I'm to write a follow-up book, I will write it from the elder point of view of wisdom. Of it is, you adapt to what is while it's happening and be aware and witness it. That's sadhana.
And when you were speaking a moment ago, it reminded me, there's a sort of a saying that people can put forward, and that is, the only way out is through. So rather than bypassing the heaviness or the anger or the frustration or the seemingly negative emotions, in fact, the only way out of this heaviness is to go through, and that's where we find our healing. And it really, literally, and probably because I've just freshly reread your story, it reminds me of your story. When you were younger and you went through this cancer journey, and you had to go through this emotional healing process with your family, your history, your ancestors, and it was almost like you needed to go back and go through the thick of that to heal and to come out. And even in your book, you say, just, it was such a simple statement, but you said, disease happens from within, and so must any cure. It's like, we've got to go through it. And isn't that embracing the aspect of sadhana?
But no one, and but if I were to write that same thing again today with the new experiences of being a targeted individual who, had gone through some very, very cruel and rough and brutal things in the last decade, I would put a footnote to that. No one can dictate to us what through means, how our day-to-day flows through it. No one carries our memory. No one carries how we do go through what we go through. Some dictator sitting there trying, like family and friends who mean well, and said, no, you've got to go through. No, you can't be looking at the movie right now, because absolutely that's bypassing. No, you can't. And in fact, I've caught up on many movies, because there were at least 40 years when I never even looked at a movie, because we were so robed and so completely tied down to the dharma of the vigilance of the path. Well, after I tossed off the robes in 2010 and all hell broke loose from all different quarters, what happened was that things changed for me. The understanding of how one goes through what one goes through is particularly individualized. And all of the wonderful well-wishers or whatever, in fact, I sort of edit out a lot of people from my life while this has been unfolding, because not that I don't love them and care for them, and when they call and need help, I'm still there. But in terms of my own personal sharing and the intimacy of it, and I'm not just looking for people who would support me to say, okay, whatever. I love the soothsayers. I love people to tell truth. I appreciate those who can tell me what I do not want to hear. But I also, you have a sense of what supports you on the journey of getting back to the whole of you. When we have a disease, when our children are ill, when our parents are moving on in their lives, we are also broken. We are also vulnerable. It's not just their vulnerability. It's our vulnerability because of our own need to respond. And we have to respond. There are certain situations where you're not exempt from responding. It is your mother, it is your child, it is your spouse, it is someone dear in the community, it is, and in fact, when you take the sort of, I didn't take to the path took to me, and then latched on. And then when I tried to get rid of the path, I realized, okay, it's kind of imbued now. I can't get rid of the path. So basically, you're going to now find a new way to live with the path, right? And I'm saying all of this because what happens is when that happens, everyone that you come in touch with is that family, is that. So then you're always in a vulnerable state because there's someone who's always vulnerable. Wherever you reach out, we reach out only to vulnerability. What are we going to reach out to? The wholeness? Those that are in wholeness don't need us, and everything that is whole is already part of our own makeup and constitution and memory and dharma. So basically, you're always reaching out to brokenness, and so you are vulnerable. And we live with that vulnerability. We have to understand that vulnerability. Nobody can live it for us. Nobody can just put the mirror up and said, this is who you were, this is who you have to become again. No, it doesn't work like that. So the understanding of going through it is very true, but there is a footnote to that, meaning we go through it the way that we are pulled to go through it.
Yes.
Sometimes, Amy, the end portal of it all is to get to another world in the highest atmosphere. No one can dictate that for us, just so we don't self-harm. Do you understand that we don't create more self-harm? That's our only thing to watch out for in the going through passage, is that we're not creating self-harm, and that our mind is not so angry at the perpetrators, and I do call them that. They are not separate from us, but they're there. And our mind is not so angry that that's also self-harm. It vibrationally hurting. It's hurting everything around us, and it's hurting us. So we have to make sure we don't stay in those moments too long as well. And that is sadhana. Sadhana is most of all awareness with non-harm.
There's so many things that have come up for me in that. So many directions we could go. I've been thinking of, the influence of karma and dharma, and there's so much that really emphasizes here how this is really about living yoga and living these traditions and understanding them in a very tangible, human way, embracing our humanness. And this ties in, we've kind of already been in this realm already of conversation, but I'd love to highlight the emphasis on navigating life's transition. And you mentioned a little earlier on the word juncture. And, if anyone out there has read your book or decides to read your book, there's so many obvious, let's say, transitions and junctures for you, how you've created meaning and move forward from these troubling times. I think, obviously health, cancer, the passing of your father, even in your book, something that really moved me was witnessing, your guru on the cover of the tape, that pivotal moment where you had a dream of your father, and then, all of this. And I just,
yes.
wow, incredible.
The visitations that we have. And the amazing thing, or seeing Mother Mary, or then have her turn into a bluebird when I was in the death stages of cancer at 18 to 21. The visitations, we must not underestimate them. We're always guided by whatever energy and spirit, comes. We are always guided. I've been in this juncture. There are many other visitations through the time of being targeted, and through the difficulties it has caused me with my health and with my work and everything else. But they're different. They're completely different. That's why I say we can't ever do the same thing we did in the first juncture of illness. It changes. We change. And lessons are very different. And I don't even want to hear the word lesson anymore, because people are sick and tired of hearing lessons. What the hell lessons? I mean, give me a break. Let's do this. Let's just look at what is. Let's try not to turn away too much, no matter how ugly it is. Let us just be with it, however painful it may be, like a disease of ourself or a loved one. let us, even if we have to peek at it little by little by little to get to it, let us do that. And let us be okay with ourselves doing that. Let us always be the witness of ourselves doing whatever it is we're doing. Let no one else be the witness to tell us that's wrong, that's right, that. In the field of absolute truth and reality, we are the pavers, we are the pathfinders. We have that human consciousness, intelligence built in each and every one of us, regardless of our religion and tradition, and that is what we have to find. Yoga is not about Hinduism, by the way. Yoga is not about India, but India gave us Sanatana Dharma, the universal understanding of practice. And fortunately, after all of those incursions, invasions by the foreign elements that were totally materialistic and wanted India's incredible wealth, they couldn't take her soul. But basically what happened was that we kept certain practices. But Sanatana Dharma means it belongs to the world. We are just sharing it. Those of us who have the luxury and the honor of being in a position to share it are sharing it. And so you adapt it to your whatever the machinations of our own constructive mind is about, whatever those pathways and portals are that we have to go through, that we've been seasoned by. All of us come from the earth. Let us not forget, however we were baptized, we came from the baptism of Mother Earth, whether it was the ancient traditions of the Celts or the Vedic. We are who we are. We're formed by that. And there's good in it and there's not so good in it. And the things that trip us up is the not so good things. And then when harshness comes into the life, we trip over those not so good things, and then we've got to come to terms with them. And that's also there. Before we go into transitions at the last phase transition, because that's a whole other conversation. And by the way, Amy, that's my next book. It's the living into death. It's the understanding of, from the ancient Vedic point of view, and my own rich experiences, how we can start preparing the sadhana of being as we go into our greatest journey ever, which is the next one. And so that comes up next. In the meantime, we're about to get published the current book that I've written through all of the things we're talking about. And it's about how we can absolutely make peace with the patriarchy and get rid of them once and for all. Anyway, and that book is called I Am Shakti. And
Beautiful.
It is so powerful for the feminine force of the entire world that it also defends men's rights and third gender rights and all the rights of our universe and brings it back into focus. So it's not necessarily an Ayurvedic book, it's more a greater understanding of the feminine force. Putting all of that aside, if we can observe the junctures of the day, if we could just take pause at the different junctures, if we can pay attention to the seasons so we learn them in the marketplace, at the farm, in the gardens, what's going on in each season. These are the basic sadhanas to be back in tune with Mother Earth. If we can just get in touch with understanding when is the full moon and when is the new moon, these simple understandings will bring us back closer to nature. And that is the premise, the ground on which all sadhana can thrive. Without those basic understanding, we are kind of shifting and shuffling.
And something you mentioned, I think, specifically related even to your book, that ties into something else that stood out for me in the path of practice, and that is how much, and also through your other work, you do speak to this a lot, and that is that women are the guardians of this process of healing and of all of life's, let's say, wholesome practices and activities and the way we live. And this is such a special recognition in terms of understanding the way society is structured now with the patriarchy and matriarchy, and embracing the wisdom and the contribution that women bring.
Yeah, because not only did patriarchy attempt to steal the Shaktified rights of the feminine, because she carries it in the alive state. She can procreate, she can, but more than procreation, her Shaktified, I talk about the anatomy of the Shakti in a very physiological, emotional, and psychological way in this book. And what basically happens is, not only did they want to disavow her of it and usurp it for themselves, which they could never, ever do, but they try and they keep trying. But they've also contaminated so much of life and so much of the feminine force. And so much of the feminine force also buys into the nonsense that these, into the whatever, to be accepted, to have the best jobs, da 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 da. So we've got so much to do in the comeuppance of it all. But right now, the earth herself, the universe herself, is shuffling all of its parts, actually. If you look at the many eclipses and the many changes of the different planets and the many stuck planets and the many interesting things that are happening astronomically in our universe right now, we see that the universe is actually like a deck of cards shuffling it all. And it gives us that breakdown, which is also vulnerable, which is the time we can change and make the changes we need to make. So that is the time that we're talking about. And it's such a wonderful pleasure to have this wide open conversation with you. I hadn't been doing interviews for a while, the last year actually, and back about 3 months backlog on my podcast, because there was so much churning to be done. And, I didn't want to have the entire interview be with difficult language, you see. So basically, we needed to churn on my own so that I can get back to a stasis. And it's really a pleasure, Amy, to see your beautiful face and spirit and talk with you. And as I said, I love Australia, so I'm a little bit partial to, when I saw that you are in Australia, I said, okay, I'll accept that. I'll accept her invite.
I'm honored. Thank you. Thank you. Actually, I would love to just ask you a couple of quick questions that should be fairly simple to answer, let's say off the cuff. What would be, this is a complete tangent from where we've been going in this conversation, but let's get to know you a little more. What would be your most favorite meal?
Oh, I love soups, especially in the winter, in the cold seasons. And I think because it's when I had my cancer bout those years, I just kind of threw roots vegetable into a big pot over an open fire, which I was lucky to have in Vermont, in the snows and all of that, and make soup. And whenever I'm not feeling well, I long for soups. I love broths, and of course, root vegetables in the broth, or leek soups, or lentil soups, or all of the thing. And second to that, I love rice. I mean, I am an absolute, I can tell you a million different ways to prepare rice, whether it's black rice and short grain or whole grain or pressure cook it or open cook it or whatever. I love a bowl of rice, and I love crushing sesame seeds on top of it. And I love seeds with the rice. And so this is all winter food. The body is needing that grounding, and not grounding in terms of kapha, but grounding in terms of all the things, the hurt, the pain, the broken, sort of the grains glue you back together. So it depends on when you're asking me. I don't have like a great deal of sweet urges, and I've never been a fruitarian. I love fruits, but if someone is willing to prepare the pineapple for me, wow, I'd have it. Or if they're prepared to prepare the mangoes for me, I'd love to have it. The tropical fruits in the tropical seasons. But I love berries in the winter. I'm also a berry person. I can use a lot of berries. I love nuts, and all of those good things. But I'm also a carb person. I love carbs. I want a good crepe or a good chapati or roti or a paratha or baguette. I had a wonderful time in France because all they have is milk and bread. and cheese.
Yes, so
Everything has
good.
milk, bread, and cheese, right?
So
So
good.
basically, it was like, oh, a second culture, right? And I know the poor vegans are probably going to die when they hear that, but I just love food.
Mm.
And when I'm not feeling well, apart from my appetite and what I long for, is a wonderful organic market. I can walk through the farmer's market and feel so much better immediately.
It's all the
Never
prana.
mind what my maladies are. I can go kind of half alive and stand there and start breathing and feeling absolutely exquisitely alive in a farmer's market. I love food.
Mm-hmm.
I can walk around endlessly. And the way I look at nature, I have a wonderful system here in New York in terms of friendship and old friendship, because I grew up since I was 16 here and then moved to North Carolina to the mountains there to grow gardens and have the big Ayurveda school and all of that. As you know, the first one in North America that we started in 81. But when I'm here, I mean, friends go, well, would you like to catch up with the museum or whatever? And, the interesting thing is, yes, from time to time, if I have to, I think most people go to the museum to impress themselves. But nonetheless, hold that thought, because what I see as the best museum at this particular stage in my life, as I did when I was much younger, and I did in every generation, is nature. No one can paint more spectacularly than Mother Nature. No one can be more flexible and make more surprising changes than Mother Nature. And so for me right now, the museums are all Mother Nature.
That's almost like the iconic site that you get to
The
experience for
iconic,
everywhere you
as,
go.
as we speak, we're having a beautiful autumn. You're having an exquisite spring. And the golden leaves of the oak, they became the yellow turmeric gold. And there's millions of turmeric gold little oak leaves just flying past the window. I have my shades shut because we're on Zoom, but basically, when I open it again, it keep on just it's like the most amazing nature wedding ceremony, right? It's like it just shimmers down.
It's such a gift. It's such a gift to have an experience of all four seasons, I think. Many people, depending on where they live in the world, they don't
And not
have that.
only that, if you sit with that, the prana, it drags the prana. As the leaves go, your prana changes. And so we don't, when we are doers as human beings, and we do way too much. So much is done for us by just being in the right environment of where we need to be. Mother Nature teaches us that. Go sit in nature. Don't do anything. Just sit there. Let Mother Nature do it for you.
That actually perfectly segues into another question I had for you is, let's preface this by saying, at this stage of your life, in this season of your life, what is one simple daily non-negotiable, something that you intend to, even if life pulls it out of your sight and life changes that particular day, but what is something that you consistently like to integrate into daily life at the moment?
Chanting the mantras, the Sanskrit mantras. I do them internally a lot now, but it's wonderful to get my voice back. For a while, I needed to internalize that voice.
Sure.
I've been out speaking a lot. I've used my voice a lot over this 50 years now, 45 years since I've been teaching. And with all that was going on, I had silence, but it was a very loud silence, Amy, because there was churning inside. But yet the voice was not being used, and deliberately so. So coming back out again to the first podcast I'm doing actually for perhaps in a while, the last 6 months with you, and also now coming back into chanting louder, but audibly, not loud, but audibly. It's a beautiful practice. Walking was one of the reasons I returned to Manhattan, to New York, is because I love to walk, and it's a city you can walk in endlessly, and so basically walking was always my best sadhana, more so than yoga actually. But having done yoga for so many years and taught it as well. But walking, just breathing and walking. And I'm getting back on my feet again to doing that, which is great.
Well, that's wonderful. Yeah, walking really just inspires that rhythm, just constant rhythm, and it's so
It's a
clearing
rhythm,
for your
and then
mind.
you're picking up the creativity of the places you're walking. And of course, in the forest of North Carolina, I mean, we walked in the forest, and it's a very different walk. Walking in Manhattan with the sirens and the noise and the cabs and the traffic, and now the bikers and and the angry public and all of that. It's a different vibe, but nonetheless, it's vibes nonetheless. And what is happening is you're meshing back into noise, but depending on the construct of your mind, noise can be siphoned into synchronicity. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's beautiful. And it's also such a practice for us to refine our awareness as well and embrace whatever.
Yeah, because when I grew up here, and these are familiar noises. And I was here for more than 30 years in Manhattan, so in my early life. And so basically they're familiar noises. So they're not jarring, because a good friend was saying the other day, oh my God, every 3 minutes there's a siren, and there are many more sirens now than before. But nonetheless, I understood that how come I'm noticing the sounds and everything, but seamlessly synchronizing it into my own mental sound. And that's a wonderful training for us. And this way, you'll never be disturbed in a yoga class or a meditation class. Most people get very angry when noises are made in a meditation class. Well, I feel that the suffocation of having to keep silent and not make noise suffocates me. I'm a free individual. I love freedom. I can't stand to be held down. But I think one of the things that probably was my greatest nemesis. Is nemesis meaning the thing that you don't like the most?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The greatest nemesis was when these characters came along that were targeting me and started to micromanage me. Started to micromanage my life. That to me was worse than death, because it absolutely injures your freedom, your personal, that glorious open stuff we've always had with nature, with everything else, the micromanagement. So when people are meditating and then people are making noises outside and everybody's getting upset, we need to tell them meditation isn't about getting upset about the noises. Meditation is about assimilating all of it into the peace of your own mind.
So the interruptions come for you to transcend.
There's no interruption. You take that sound and you synchronize it, and you test how good the peace of your own mind is.
Yes.
And if it irritates you, well, you got to go do some work on that.
Yeah, precisely.
I'll be out there. They'll be out there making more noise for the pitta types that get so irritated by all of it.
Absolutely. That makes so much sense. And it also, so much of what you've said today really helps us to embrace our humanness, embrace the reality of living daily life and not trying to avoid perceived discomfort and perceived challenge. And everything you've said is so just beautifully and sweetly given us the grace to accept everything that comes our way. And I think that that's something that we mature into a little bit.
And the key word is not accept so much, darling, as it is observe it, witness it. Even if we can't stomach it right then and there, and we can't assimilate it, and we don't want to swallow it, and we don't want to accept it, that's okay.
We're acknowledging.
Acceptance is extremely difficult. Let's just observe it. Let's not deny it. Let's witness it. As painful as it may be, let us, even if we peek at it, and if we put blinders on and have tiny little vision, we can peek at it. We can do that too. But acceptance is a very difficult word. It's asking, when we ask people to forgive the Holocaust, it's asking them the impossible, because they first have to accept that it happened and that it was their reality before they can forgive. So acceptance is difficult, but we witness it, we observe it, and we can start easing the hurt and no longer hold it with hurt and pain and anger. There's processes, right? Everybody, it's a process. The deeper the stuff hits us, the less we can accept it. And that's why most people deny it or move away from it and not go through it, because it's so painful and you can't just jump into acceptance.
Sure. And thank you for articulating that. Yeah.
I do articulate because I see it all the time, and I see all the New Age preachers, just pushing that on people. And I'm saying it's just going to hurt them because there are things that are unacceptable. And that's a good word at first. It is unacceptable. But then there is a way, there's a pathway, there's a way to ease in. But we have to, and we are built to observe. That doesn't take energy. That doesn't take away from us. That doesn't push us down some tunnel we don't want to go into. Observation is our first nature. Let's get back to that. Doesn't take any energy to observe. What takes energy is to judge it and deny it and run away from it, or try and accept it when you can't. That takes energy. But just witnessing it and observing it is our nature. Let's get back to the witness of who we are. We are the witness nature. I am Aham Brahmasmi. I am that Brahman, that witness, that self, that Atman that witnesses everything. That's who we need to get back to. Because it does move. It really moves. We accept. And before you know it, we begin to develop a relationship with that observation. And it leads to acceptance. Eventually we have to accept it, of course, or else we don't move on from it. But it can take years, and nobody's to decide how long it takes an individual to move through something. We can't tell a mother who's just lost her young son. You got to accept it. You got to move on. Baloney. I would slap someone if I were a mother that lost my son and they came up to me and told me, you have to accept it.
Absolutely. 100%.
But we can observe how we move through it, right? And that is.
The idea of acceptance really seems quite dismissive. It's like, let's dismiss, accept, move on, dismiss. Whereas, yes, I think we're circling back around so beautifully to what we spoke to, or what you spoke to earlier on at the beginning of this conversation, which is perfect.
Well, you brought it up in terms of having to move through something, which is absolutely the point. And that is the goddess truth. That is the universal truth. But there's a process, and each individual has their own process, depending on their life and their conditionings. And that process is the point. That way, that path, that process, that movement is the way. Sadhana helps us to move and not become stagnant. Because apart from not being able to accept immediately, we can also get very frozen very quickly. And so sadhana, by observing the leaves falling, by knowing there is nature, she's pulling on me, she's pulling me, she's always embracing me, she's always calling on me. Get out of your mind, get into nature. That is the gentle movement that moves us forward, and then we kind of work with it. We work without working. We don't have to work. The only thing we have to do is be clear that we are observing it. And then beyond the observation, that we are also witnessing it. And later we come into the relationship with that witnessing. And that's when the real work begins.
Absolutely. And you've been such a beacon for all of this, very, very much. And I'm just mindful of your time, and I'd like to respect your time. But I do want to say that I'm very thankful, especially in light of what you've shared today, thankful for your voice, for being here. It feels like such a blessing that we've been able to have this conversation. It's an immense gift to have the time with you. Your insight, your wisdom is so immensely appreciated in our world, particularly at this moment in time. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne-Landry, and it's a joy to be with you. And you're quite wonderful, and may your podcast reach limitless numbers of people.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. If this episode was of value to you and your life, please subscribe. And if you can think of someone who would benefit from this dialogue, please do them a favor and send it their way. If you feel called, hop on over to iTunes and leave a 5-star review. This is the best way to get these conversations into the ears and hearts of our wider community, to those who need it most. You can find me at amyelandry.com or over on Instagram at amyelandry. May we all move a little closer to a life living in alignment.